Welcome back to Manhwa Unlocked. Hit that subscribe button and let's unlock another world. The story begins with the main heroine standing before an evil being she must defeat. This man's very presence radiated malevolent energy, and he called her by name Charlotte Eleanor. He then declared that he had been waiting for her all this time. The girl in turn stood before him, staring intently. Suddenly, the wizards who had come with her and were standing behind spoke up. One of the men told her not to do it, urging that they needed to retreat as soon as possible. It was because the sinister man standing before them brought only death. He could not be defeated by mere human strength. And if she, in her current condition, used any more magic, her life would be in danger. That's why they had to withdraw. At that very moment, the heroine interrupted him and asked where exactly they planned to retreat to. If they didn't end this now, wouldn't it mean the end for all of them? Her companion admitted that she was right, but said that things weren't that simple. Then, the girl tore a piece of cloth from her clothes and tied it around her injured eye. She said that this was exactly why she intended to fight until her last breath. After all, it was this man who had once taught her everything she knew. With a touch of irony, she added that magic yields to the will of the one who wields it. That's why they had no reason to fear. Mana and magic were her family and her friends. Her words deeply inspired those who stood beside her. Most of them were wounded or barely clinging to life. The girl took up her weapon and declared that the land beneath her feet was the place of her birth. Therefore, this world itself was her ally. A moment later, she unleashed her magic and struck at the enemy, and then two immense forces, light and dark, clashed in a fierce battle. And so it happened that, on the day of destruction, one girl saved the entire world. The enemy she had defeated spoke to Charlotte Eleanor before his death, telling her to remember his words well. Then he grabbed her by the clothes and pulled her close. He declared that he would come for her again, swearing that he would return and consume her completely, leaving nothing behind. After that fateful day, the entire world began to call this girl the archmage. Sometime later, the girl's teacher fell gravely ill. During this period, the heroine stayed by his side and the man spoke to her. The girl was eating calmly while reading some book. Her companion told her that she was a genius of magic and that her abilities had far exceeded all his expectations. Coldly, the heroine replied that she already knew that, after which a brief silence filled the room. The teacher became angry and shouted, asking if she could at least try to be a little more modest. The heroine shouted back, demanding to know when he would stop acting like that, always pretending to be sick or on the verge of death. The maid, watching this, laughed and remarked that they were at it again. Then the old man stood up and patted the girl on the head. He said he had one last wish before death. But the heroine replied that he wasn't going to die. After all, it was just a common cold. Ignoring her words, he asked her to take on disciples of her own. Now that she had revealed her power to the world, many enemies would appear in her path, foes that only she could defeat. That was why she had to go and take on 5 disciples who would share this burden with her. He also asked her not to live her life in loneliness as he had. She must find love, build a family, and be happy. The heroine looked at her teacher with sadness and asked how she was supposed to do that. She admitted that she might be stronger, younger, and smarter than him. But how could she ever find such people? Hearing this, the teacher grew angry and immediately chased after her, demanding to know if this was what she called modesty. The maid once again watched the scene and, smiling, said that they were as full of life as ever. After some time, the teacher stopped and wondered where the girl had gone. He could no longer see her. The heroine, meanwhile, was hiding behind a wall, thinking about the disciples her teacher had mentioned. And from that moment on, much time passed, and many things changed. The extraordinary talent of archmage Charlotte Eleanor eventually surpassed the level of the first 8 circles of magic. The students she had trained were hailed as the geniuses of the century. Some called Charlotte the heroine who saved the world from the spawn of evil. Others regarded her as the great hope of all magic. Yet despite all her accomplishments, in the end, death awaited her as well. One day, the heroine was walking and thinking how truly tired she was. Her foolish disciples were so clingy, and she couldn't understand why it was so hard to escape from them. She opened a massive door and stepped inside, reflecting on how they had even embedded tracking magic into a crystal orb. The moment they lost contact with her for even a second, they made such a fuss as if the end of the world had come. She wondered how she could tell them that she would soon die. Because of the blessing of the Fairy King, she had always looked young, and her students had long forgotten her true age. She tried to recall how old she was. Was it 120? Then she realized she was actually 122. She thought about how much time had passed and how many things had happened since then. She felt she had lived long enough. The girl understood that in this world, everything has a beginning and an end. Her heart ached with longing for her disciples. At that moment, she approached her own coffin, which stood in the center of the room, surrounded by a golden circle. She thought that she could not take care of her students forever. Each of them had their own path to walk. Still, she couldn't help but worry a little about the youngest one. But an old woman like her could no longer accompany them. The heroine could only hope that they would live good lives and fulfill their destinies. Then she lay down inside the coffin, remarking that she had never imagined she would die like this. After that, the heroine raised her hand and said that this would be her final spell. Once she cast it, the mana stored in her body would burst forth and spread across the entire world. Her spirit would then nourish the land and become the breath of a new god. She thought to herself that there could be no death more noble than this. Even her teacher would be proud. She had lived a worthy life, and at that moment she closed her eyes. In that very instant, as she did so, a whirlwind of memories swept through Charlotte's mind. She knew that when she died, each of her students would receive a letter containing her final will. She was certain they would be shocked, but she hoped they wouldn't grieve too much. Secondly, she remembered that the potato stew she'd eaten for dinner the previous night had been more delicious than usual. She also wished she could once again step on the face of that scoundrel with the horse-like mug who had burned her research. Before death, she also wished to fight Jeffrey one more time and finally win. Then she remembered that she had forgotten to repay her debt to a traveler at the tavern. She thought of a few more things, but then realized that everything else was fine. Yet there was one regret in Charlotte Eleanor's life, one she could never speak of to anyone. That regret was the simplest thing of all: love. Charlotte's life had been rich, filled with magic, battles, and care for her students. But despite her wisdom and vast experience, there was one thing she had never known. She had never known love. A love as fierce as fire, a tenderness as soft as the spring wind. She thought about it for a moment, then decided that it was fine as it was. She concluded that she had no other regrets in life. Still, she felt just a little sadness. Barely anything, really, maybe just a tiny bit. At that very moment, the spell she had cast took effect, and the building she was in was filled with a brilliant light. But after a short while, that bright light faded and the mana spread throughout the world. A moment later, some of the girl's priests addressed His Majesty, telling him that a more thorough investigation should be conducted in the lands of Rodon, and that he ought to consider the matter carefully. At that very moment, an envelope carrying a letter from their teacher arrived before him. When he received it, he immediately jumped up from his throne, startling his subjects. Then he rushed off somewhere, and they wondered where exactly he was heading. Another letter from the teacher also reached one of her other disciples. The girl was somewhere in a forest, and upon receiving it, she immediately understood what had happened. Another disciple was sitting in his study before a young man who was begging for mercy, insisting that he had only done what he was ordered to do, that those people had forced him. Suddenly, the heroine's disciple leapt to his feet, and silence filled the room. At that moment, he saw an envelope from his teacher flying toward his estate. Yet another disciple sat deep in the forest, holding a nest with baby birds. She softly told them to stay calm, since their nest had fallen. Then she heard her assistants approaching through the trees. When she turned around, she saw that they were carrying an envelope. Taking it into her hands, she realized it was her teacher's final will. One more disciple was in a snowy region. He too received the same letter and was shocked by its contents. Deeply distressed, he began to worry about Lady Charlotte. Meanwhile, the main heroine was still lying in that same place. Conscious once again, she began to open her eyes. She wondered if this was the final path. Perhaps her death spell had actually worked. It felt strangely pleasant, and she thought, is this how a person feels after death? Her body felt as light as a feather. She wondered if it was because her spirit had left her body. Then she realized she could see with her right eye, as if she were still alive. Opening her eyes fully, she couldn't believe what she saw. She really was alive, and began to climb out of the coffin in which she had lain. Rising a little, she looked around the room and confirmed that it was indeed her chamber. With fear and confusion, she asked herself why she was still alive. Could it be that her magic had failed? But she soon reasoned that even if it had, she should have died anyway. Then she noticed that her voice sounded strange. She raised her hands and saw that they were tiny, her clothes now far too big for her. Grabbing her face, she felt around in disbelief. Then it struck her. She had literally become a child. Terrified, she screamed. Thus, archmage Charlotte Eleanor, at the age of 121, who had devoted her life to serving the world, had seemingly fallen into eternal sleep. Her disciples were supposed to say farewell and weep at her funeral, vowing to protect the world in her stead so that she could rest in peace without worry. That was how it was meant to be. The heroine passing peacefully into the afterlife, leaving everything behind for her students. Yet now, things were entirely different. The heroine realized that Mana had indeed left her body, which meant her spell had worked. Yet she still didn't understand why she was alive or why her body had become so strange. She slid down to look at her reflection and saw that she had turned into a small child. Sadness filled her as she whispered in disbelief that she truly had become little. She thought that it simply couldn't be, for true magic comes from the will of the one whose heart desires it most. Then the heroine stepped outside to look at the world. She wondered if perhaps the one regret she had carried all her life was what had saved her, that the reason for it all was love. Somewhere else, a young man was sorting through gifts meant for a duke when he came across a letter. Opening it, he was startled to see the word love written inside. His colleague immediately asked if he was fooling around again, but the irritated young man remarked that it was simply ridiculous. Apparently, those people had never even met His Excellency, yet they kept sending him love letters. Just now, he was holding in his hands another message addressed to their beloved Duke Luster. The girl wondered if he was jealous. The man retorted that what she said was nonsense. She added that their outstanding Archduke had gained fame very quickly and now reaped the results of it. The man remarked that the whole situation was becoming more and more confusing. It seemed he needed to find a woman he liked and marry her as soon as possible. He really should have done that about 50 years ago. And today, a tiny girl had come, saying she was looking for His Grace the Archduke, even calling him by name. The man couldn't understand why such a pea-sized girl was being so rude. His colleague asked what little girl he was talking about. He replied that it really was a little girl, but her way of speaking was quite strange. He added that something about her felt off, and overall, she seemed very peculiar to him. Meanwhile, life flourished on the streets of that same city. A man bought some goods and walked along calmly. But suddenly, a little girl called out to him, addressing him as a young man. The man immediately turned around and saw the small girl who had spoken to him. She asked politely if he could tell her where the nearest magic shop was located. The man thought in surprise. Did she really just call him a young man? At that moment, the heroine wondered why everything had to be so complicated. The man pointed with his finger and told her to turn just around that corner. There she would see the main square. From there, she only needed to go to the 3rd street. He explained that the shop was on the 2nd floor of the house with the blue roof. Then he noticed the girl had fallen silent and asked if she could hear him. The heroine, meanwhile, thought that she had traveled all this way but still hadn't managed to find Jeffrey. Her mana rings were empty, so she couldn't use detection magic or teleportation. Before casting the spell, the girl had discarded her belongings, and now she literally had nothing left. She needed to sell something at the magic shop to earn some money. She thanked the man for his help and said goodbye, thinking that it somehow felt as if she had returned to the very beginning of her life's journey. Just as she walked away a short distance, a man suddenly flew out from a nearby building and slammed a door right into her previous conversation partner. The girl immediately turned around, shocked by what had happened behind her. There she saw the man pinned under the door, and sitting on it was another fellow with long hair. The girl quickly asked if the young man was all right. Suddenly, another man, the one who had slammed the door, stepped forward. He shouted that the guy was a fool and demanded that he repeat what he had just said. After all, they were now in Klaus, the land of knights. The man couldn't believe that someone dared to claim there existed a person stronger than their archduke, the master swordsman Loster. His opponent replied that such a person did exist. Charlotte Eleanor, the archmage of the Marvel Empire. The knight called him a scoundrel. How could a citizen of Klaus say such dreadful words? His opponent responded that first and foremost, he was a mage, and only second, a resident of the duchy. Hearing this, the heroine was shocked. Were they really fighting over something so foolish? The knight declared the mage a traitor and ordered him to stop polluting the pure air of Klaus with his presence and get out. The mage asked why he should leave. After all, he was a citizen of Klaus, even if a magician. But the knight snarled that he must have a death wish. The heroine suddenly shouted, demanding that they stop this nonsense and get down from the door. By that time, a crowd of onlookers had gathered. They began whispering that the men were apparently arguing about who was stronger, Archduke Luster or Archmage Charlotte Eleanor. Soon the spectators themselves started quarreling over the same question. The men then turned to the heroine and sneered, asking what that little brat had just said. They told her to stay out of adults' business and keep her distance. The heroine asked them to get down before they accidentally killed that poor young man. The mage asked why the girl spoke like his grandfather. His opponent exclaimed how that wretch dared to talk to a little girl like that. The heroine continued to listen as the men kept arguing endlessly. Her outburst immediately drew everyone's attention. The crowd fell silent, and the girl demanded that the men climb down from the door, since a man was lying right beneath it. Finally, she lost her patience and shouted for them to shut their mouths once and for all. They finally got down, and the heroine rushed to check if the man was all right. She thought with relief that it seemed everything had turned out fine. Then the crowd of onlookers began to applaud the girl for what she had just done. It turned out that she, without any help, managed to save the man from those two people. The knight didn't understand what had happened and asked what that was. Just a moment ago, his body had been moving on its own. He couldn't comprehend how, and immediately turned to the mage, asking if he had once again used a spell on his body. The crowd began whispering among themselves again. They too were curious about what had happened. It seemed that this child had just stopped a fight. Apparently, adults shouldn't behave like that in front of children. At that moment, Ruine thought that she simply didn't have time for this and wished they would just keep fighting as much as they wanted. Suddenly, a man approached and asked what was going on there. The crowd instantly froze at his words, and the main heroine also felt that the voice sounded quite familiar. The man who asked that question turned out to be Jeffrey. He slowly walked down the road, saying it had just been very noisy here. Everyone looked closely at the man, wondering who he was at first. Then someone exclaimed that he was the Archduke Louisler. The heroine remembered her friend and realized that it was Jeffrey. The young man, in turn, carefully examined the crowd, clearly searching for someone. Suddenly, his subordinates rushed after him, asking what had happened. After all, he had left right in the middle of their conversation. Considering his weak health, it was very difficult for them to keep up with him. The Archduke remarked that he was sure he had just sensed a familiar presence in the crowd. Then he asked if perhaps he had been mistaken. His subordinates stood behind him, breathing heavily and complaining that they were exhausted. Suddenly, the same knight approached his grace and asked Archduke Louisler to allow him the honor of meeting him. He said it was a great privilege and that he had always wanted to ask him something. Then he added that he wanted to ask what the Archduke thought of the archmage Marvella Charlotte Eleanor. The Archduke looked at him and asked why he should answer such a question. The knight admitted that he was right. Everything was so obvious that there was no need to waste time answering. The knight continued that he thought the same way. It was ridiculous to even compare the Archduke and the archmage. After all, how could an ordinary mage ever compare to a master of the sword? It's no wonder they say that the sword is a power unmatched in the entire world. How could some nameless girl possibly stand on the same level as the Archduke? That's why she should simply taste the bitterness of defeat. These words enraged Jeffrey. He immediately grabbed the man's head with his hand and squeezed tightly, growling aggressively that he should watch his tongue. Then he asked, hadn't the man wanted to become a knight? How unfortunate that his dream would never come true. Everyone watched in fear as the Archduke continued. He said that it seemed to him the man hadn't even trained his body. After that, he grabbed the man's other arm and said he should listen carefully. Klaus had no need for such a worthless man as him. One of the subordinates tried to urge his superior to stop the Archduke, but he said he couldn't. He was too afraid. Suddenly, the main heroine approached Jeffrey and told him to stop what he was doing. The man immediately froze and turned his gaze toward the girl standing behind him. Then she asked what he thought he was doing. Did he imagine himself a king or even a god? She added that he hadn't yet fallen into senile dementia, so why torment someone just over a few words? The young man replied that he merely wanted to scare the knight since the brat had said such terrible things. He was just playing with him. Then he grabbed the knight and threw him backward. After that, he approached the girl, knelt down beside her, and examined her face. After a moment, he muttered in disbelief. Could it really be Lottie? The girl confirmed that it was indeed her. Then a subordinate came up and asked Archduke Louisler if he had calmed down already. Then, noticing the girl, he asked if she was his daughter. But the Archduke immediately threw something at him, and the subordinate quickly added that it was just a joke. Then the young man told Lottie that her magical presence had been so weak that he almost thought he was mistaken. Then he smiled and said that it really was her after all. At that very moment, the crowd began whispering even more intensely. They wondered what was happening. Could this child really have stopped another fight? Someone asked if that was truly the Archduke Louisler himself. Jeffrey then picked the girl up and asked why she was still so small. The heroine immediately told him to put her back down. She was asking him nicely, for now. After that, they went together to the mansion. The heroine was choosing clothes for herself so she could move around comfortably. The woman assisting her said that this year, ribbons with lace were in fashion. And if the ribbon was decorated with jewels, it would look even more beautiful. Then the woman told the girl to just look at herself. She looked so elegant in that dress. Indeed, the heroine was already dressed in a white gown with a jeweled bow tied at the center. Jeffrey looked at her and said that he liked it, but wanted to see other designs as well. They immediately told him that, of course, many dresses of different cuts had been prepared for the fitting. The man said that was excellent. Then he wanted a dress from each design. But that annoyed the heroine, and she said she'd had enough. Then she asked the man what he was doing. She had already said that any outfit would be fine. He replied that she should understand. It was his first time seeing her in the form of a child. So what was wrong if she tried on this dress and a few others? Then the heroine turned to the young woman assisting her, who asked what she wanted. The heroine said that it would be enough and that she could go now. Jeffrey remarked that she really did enjoy causing him trouble. Then he added that that was indeed enough for now, and they could leave them alone. The woman immediately left the room, deeply shocked. She thought about what had just happened. She couldn't believe that this little girl dared to speak so casually to the Archduke. Sometime later, the man sat at a table with the girl. He asked why she looked the way she did. He had been unable to contact her for a long time, and judging by the state of her mana, he didn't think she had changed her appearance using any spell. Then he handed her a heart-shaped sweet and asked what exactly had happened. The heroine told Jeffrey that she had believed there were no regrets in her life. She had lived a full, eventful life and thought she had nothing left to strive for. But that turned out not to be true. Then she added that there had never been love in her life. At that moment, she ate the sweet that the Archduke had given her and thought it was quite delicious. The man then asked what she was trying to tell him with all this. He wanted her to explain. She said she had no regrets, but then what was this talk about love? He didn't understand what it had to do with her becoming a child. He froze for a moment and then asked if she had tried to kill herself. The girl hesitated, thinking how perceptive he was. Then she said that, of course, she hadn't meant to. It all just happened differently. Since things had turned out that way, she wanted to leave her mana to the world, to help it. The girl continued that, honestly, she had lived long enough and was a bit tired of everything. She had thought she was dead, but somehow she was alive again. Suddenly, she looked at her companion and was shocked. She saw tears streaming down from his eye. She immediately jumped up and asked what was wrong with him. The man said that nothing serious had happened. It's just that his eyes sweat from time to time. The girl looked at him in disbelief and asked what nonsense he was talking about. Then the man said that she really had planned to kill herself and hadn't even told him. The heroine became flustered and insisted that she hadn't killed herself. He replied that next time, if she decided to die, she should tell him. After all, he had lived long enough, and he would die together with her. Then he asked if it had all been because of the curse. It turned out that he blamed himself for everything. That day he should have stopped her, but couldn't. The heroine, her companion, said that this was just like Lottie, but she shouldn't have to bear all burdens alone. He asked why she couldn't rely on him, at least, since he was her close friend. The main heroine immediately replied that she was doing exactly that, asking her friend for help. Then she took his head in her hands, lifted it up to her, and said that the moon had decided to start a new life and had come to him for help, because he was her dear friend, Jeffrey Thane Lewistler. At that moment, her companion asked if she really had decided to start a new life. The girl said that yes, that was exactly what she had decided. Then she asked, doesn't magic always begin with a wish from the heart? So it seemed that magic had freed her from her only regret and given her this form. That's why she decided to live her life once more. This would be her new second life. Her companion looked at her intently and asked if her true wish had been love. He also asked if she meant love between a man and a woman. The girl said nothing, and he understood everything. Then he sighed sadly and said that perhaps they should start with her manner of speaking. She sounded like a little old lady. The heroine asked what he meant, not understanding what was wrong with the way she talked. At that very moment, one of the heroine's students entered the building where the girl was. He was in a hurry and wanted to find out what had happened to his teacher. He carefully examined the room where his mentor had once rested. There, in the center, he saw a coffin, and gold scattered all around it. He picked up a small piece of it and examined it closely. Then he left the room and declared that he would find his mentor no matter what it took. Sometime later, the main heroine and the Archduke were sitting at a table with another young man. He asked His Excellency what was going on here. The Archduke told him to simply answer the question he'd been asked. The heroine immediately asked if he remembered her. The man said that of course he remembered her. She was the strange little girl who had come in that morning. Jeffrey smiled and said that of course she was strange. Then he said they'd forget about that for now and asked the young man to introduce himself. The man was surprised and asked, just like that, to introduce himself out of nowhere. The Archduke replied that yes, exactly like that, and gave him 3 seconds to do it. The man panicked and said that his name was Phaeton Sylvan. He was 23 years old and unmarried, the third son of Marquis Sylvan. At the moment, he served as one of the knights of the great Archduke Leusler. He had sworn to serve his grace until death. His hobbies included reading, and his special skill was fencing. He also couldn't eat spicy food, though otherwise he wasn't picky. Jeffrey asked how this man compared to the girl. She replied that he, like her, couldn't eat spicy food, and Jeffrey said that meant he would suit her well. Then Jeffrey clapped his hands and stood up to congratulate the young man, saying he was now officially the archmage's personal bodyguard. The man asked what he meant by that, but Jeffrey assured him that he was confident he'd do well. After that, he escorted the young man out of the room and said the rest of the job details would be provided later. The girl took a note and said that now they had found her a bodyguard. Next, they only needed to find her work. Jerry asked Lottie if she really intended to hide the truth from her students. The heroine replied angrily that yes, that's exactly what she was going to do. After all, they must have already received the letters with her last will. Now that her mana had left her, they wouldn't be able to trace her and would believe she truly died. The man said that if that's how she saw it, then fine. The heroine added that it really would be for the best. After all, her students had relied on her too much in the past. If they continued to believe she was dead, they could finally become independent and learn to live relying only on their own decisions. Suddenly, her companion remarked that it seemed she didn't know her students very well. She asked what he meant by that. The man replied that everything would go just the way she wanted, because the most important thing was that she had asked for his help. And for her sake, he was ready to do anything. He even said he could handle her students if needed. Hearing this, the heroine immediately got angry, grabbed the man by his tie, pulled him close, and demanded to know what he meant by handle. If he so much as touched her students, she'd kill him. Her companion quickly said he understood. Then he mentioned that his hands had suddenly started sweating again. But before he could continue, the heroine interrupted, saying she liked this personality of his. Then she handed him a paper. The Archduke looked at it and asked if this was about a certain county, a quiet rural land. He then read that the name Arya Lyson was written there. After that, he added that from this moment on, Archmage Charlotte Eleanor would become the daughter of Count Lyson, Arya Lyson. After that, Jeffrey rested his head on the girl's hand and softly said how happy he was that her eyes had healed again. He added that even in this life, he would always stay by her side and do everything he could to help her. As her best friend, he wished that her new life would be filled with happiness. The heroine thought that maybe this really was the new chance that mana and magic had given her. From now on, she would live not as an archmage who saved the world, nor as someone's teacher, but simply as an ordinary person. Sometime later, the heroine stood and asked her guard what those small red-haired creatures were. They looked like ripe apples. Indeed, in front of her stood children with bright red hair who looked very much like her guard. He immediately explained that they were new friends for Lady Arya, and also his cousins. It turned out that Jeffrey wanted her to have friends for her new life. Suddenly, the girl asked the man if that little one had just called them kids. The man looked at her and replied that since she was the youngest, she was actually the child here. This made the heroine furious, and she shouted Jeffrey's name in anger. At that same time, the Archduke was standing in his office when he felt a surge of magical energy approaching. Then he muttered that he had told Lottie she didn't know her students very well. At that very moment, one of her students materialized in his office, the same young man who had earlier come to her tomb. For a brief moment, silence filled the room. The Archduke turned to the man and said that he had come, just as he said he would. The young man demanded to know where she was. The Archduke asked who he was talking about, pretending not to understand. The young man clarified he meant Charlotte, and insisted the Archduke tell him where she was. The Archduke asked if the man was seriously questioning him. After all, wasn't he the one who should be asking the questions here? Lately, he hadn't been able to contact her and wondered if something had happened to Lottie. Suddenly, the glasses he was holding crumbled into dust. The heroine student said that if Lady Charlotte was staying in the lands of Klaus, there was no way the Archduke wouldn't know about it. And as he spoke, his expression turned frightening. Jeffrey remarked that young people these days were unbelievably rude. He said this because the student had actually injured him with magic. He added that even if the boy was his friend's student, there were still limits to everything. Right after that, the man grabbed his sword, saying that it seemed it was time to teach this brat some manners. But suddenly, he noticed two more figures appearing before him. The two who materialized were also students of the main heroine. Upon arrival, they immediately asked where their teacher was. Jeffrey sighed and said he gave up. After all, 3 against 1 was a bit too much even for him. Meanwhile, the main heroine was sitting at the table with her so-called new friends, who were fighting over food. The girl said that the dish was hers since he'd promised it to her last time. The boy teased her, saying she shouldn't believe everything and should stop eating so much. She was practically a pig already. Suddenly, the heroine turned to another little girl and told her to take the piece she had. There was no need to fight over food. The little girl immediately hugged the heroine sweetly and said she was so kind. Then she began to eat, and the boy called her a pig again. He turned to the heroine and asked why she had given away her portion. His sister already ate plenty. Then he offered his own piece and told her to take it. But Arya said she didn't need it and that he should eat it himself. He needed to eat more and grow big and strong. The boy looked at her and said she was really weird. Then he asked if she said her name was Arya Lyson. Immediately after that, he asked if he could just call her Arya. The girl looked at him carefully and thought for a moment. The heroine thought that yes, that was indeed her new name. Maybe Jeffrey was right after all. In this new life, she should also become a new person, not live as before. So she told the boy that of course he could call her that. The boy happily agreed, clearly delighted. The heroine thought that yes, she really should meet new people, live freely, and rest in this new place. And perhaps along the way, she might erase her one regret by meeting the person fate had prepared for her. But first, she needed to grow up a little. Suddenly, the Archduke's subordinate opened the office door. She immediately addressed His Excellency, noticing the chaos in the room, and that Jeffrey was the only one sitting on a chair. She was startled and asked what had happened during the night. He smiled and replied that, considering 3 of the archmage's students had visited him, everything was perfectly fine now. Then he recalled what had happened the previous night. When the other 2 students arrived, they immediately grabbed the one who had come first. One of them, grabbing Evan by the collar, demanded that he explain what had really happened, since he had stayed with their teacher until the very end. But Evan quickly turned away from him and instead asked Jeffrey where their teacher was. The girl who had also arrived analyzed the situation and said that it seemed no one present actually knew where their teacher was. So something must have happened to her. She concluded this because she couldn't sense anything. No presence, no mana, nothing at all. It was as if their teacher had truly vanished from this world. The boy who came with her asked angrily what nonsense she was talking about. There had to be something. It was impossible that their teacher had simply disappeared from existence. Suddenly, Jeffrey interrupted their argument and asked if something really had happened to Lottie. Then he politely asked them to at least tell him the details. But at that moment, no one was listening to him, and the girl said that she didn't think this old man knew anything. Her companion agreed, saying he thought the same. Yet he still couldn't come to terms with everything after that letter she had sent them. A moment later, the girl declared that she would go meet Carcillion. Maybe if they followed their teacher's path from Marvel, they could find some clues. The boy added that he would find her even if he had to turn the whole world upside down. At that very moment, they both materialized and disappeared from the room. Thus, only Jeffrey and Evan remained. The boy told the Archduke that he would return, and right after saying that, he vanished as well. Now the man was left alone with his thoughts and remarked that it wasn't as if he was waiting for the boy to appear again in this room. Jeffrey now sat in his office, thinking about what had happened the previous night. He said he had to hide the girl well so that no one could ever find her. It meant that for some time, it would be better if they didn't see each other at all. After all those events, 8 years had already passed. The main heroine was walking down a path, followed by a young man holding flowers. Suddenly he shouted, "Lady Lyson, please wait for me!" He was blushing deeply, clearly embarrassed by what he was doing. The heroine stopped immediately and looked at the boy calling out to her. He approached, knelt before her, and offered her the flowers. Then he said, "Lady Lyson, my heart has belonged to you since the day we first met. That's why I ask you to accept my sincere feelings and become my wife." The girl looked at him in great surprise. She thought to herself that this boy looked like a child. She was sure she had seen him before, probably in the literature club. Judging by his appearance, he had likely only just reached adulthood. That was why she was so confused. The boy was about 19 years old, while she, in truth, was 129. So she apologized and said there was too large a gap between them, one she feared they could never overcome. Therefore, they could never be together. Then she turned and ran away, thinking she had to leave as quickly as possible. The boy tried to stop her, but she didn't listen. She understood that since she had cast the death spell and awakened in this young body, 8 whole years had already passed. All that time, she had been living as Arya Leeson. During these years, she had perfected every movement and mannerism of this girl. Yet even so, she could never rid herself of the feeling that her mind didn't belong to this body. After all, when she looked at that boy, she still thought of him as just a child. Even though he swore eternal love to her, she simply couldn't reciprocate. Suddenly, her friends, the ones she had met 8 years ago, called out to her. One of them asked why she was taking so long, and another told her to hurry up and join them. The heroine immediately told them she was on her way. Yet, with sadness in her heart, she thought that even in this life, love would remain an unattainable dream for her. Then the girl approached her friends, unaware that someone was walking behind her. The person was fully cloaked, with a hood covering their face, making them nearly impossible to recognize. But when he looked at the girl, he realized that it really was Charlotte, and he recognized her instantly. The next events took place in the Klaus Empire, more precisely in the city of Avente, the imperial capital. At that moment, a white-haired girl was running through the outskirts of the city. She looked terrified, trying to hide from someone chasing her. A few seconds later, she managed to hide behind a house in a narrow alley. She was trembling with fear and covered her mouth so as not to make a sound. But suddenly, her pursuer caught up and asked in a chilling voice whether she was hiding there. After that, he said that all this was strange since he was sure that she had gone exactly here. Then he asked if it really just seemed to him. The girl thought that probably he would leave now, but it was not as she thought, and the guy began to approach her. And then, after a moment, the girl noticed that the guy was already standing in front of her. She got very scared and immediately stepped back. She also noticed that other people had come with him, not only he himself. The guy told the miss that everything was fine and that she should just not be afraid. And all this because they really were not bad people. At this time, in another part of the city, the host in a fine suit asked for attention. He told those present that now the time had come for their introduction. Then he introduced the main heroine together with her companions and said that these were new members of the club. It turns out that these people would be growing the happy Lulu together with them. Right after that, he asked my members to introduce themselves. The first to say her name was the main heroine and said that her name was Arya Leeson. Then it was her friend who said that she was Judith Halford. The last one introduced himself and said that his name was Jerome Halford. At that moment, everyone clapped happily and wished them a pleasant time. The heroine just thought that she already had a literature club, and also a dance club and a meditation club. And now, it turns out, also a Lulu growing club. Right now, she wondered what that Lulu even meant. Judith whispered to her friend that it was a new fashionable trend in the city of Avente to grow Lulu. Therefore, she asked, wasn't it wonderful? At that very moment, the man said that there was a small explanation for the new members of the club. Then he showed the plants and said that Lulu was a new type of flower that the magician Marvella Hit Lulu had bred 3 years ago. It turns out that this flower has a magical property. It changes the color of its petals depending on the change of mood of the person who planted it. It turns out that when a person is happy, the petals are colored in bright tones, and when a person is sad, the flower darkens. But also a very romantic story is connected with this plant. It happens very rarely, but if the petals of Lulu acquire a deep red color, it means that the person who planted it will meet the love destined by their own fate. The heroine at that moment listened to the man very attentively. Then this man said that they should wait a little, and now he would bring the seeds for their newcomers. The heroine immediately thought what kind of love destined by fate that was supposed to be. At the same time, that very man handed them the seeds. The girl thought that now even such things were being done. Suddenly, Judith grabbed the girl by the hand and pulled her somewhere. She said that now they must go to a new place. The heroine asked where they still needed to go. At that time, the man who had been talking to them said that they should be careful, because the seeds were already planted in the pots. The companion noticed that after all, they hadn't been in the capital for a long time, and they really needed to manage everything. Arya noted that they would stay here for some more time, so there was no need to hurry now. The friend noted that she was right, but if she did nothing again, she would just sit in the room once more. At that moment, while they were walking, some guy was already watching them. After some time, the heroine noticed that they had already been walking around the city for 10 days, and perhaps they should take a rest. The friend noted that they needed to go and eat some cake. After all, there was a place nearby. At that very moment, while they were talking about this, a mysterious stranger reached out his hand to the main heroine. But almost immediately, her friends grabbed the guy by the hand. At the same time, they asked strictly who he was. Arya looked at this man and said that they should let him go, because after all, it was Lord Sylvan. At that very moment, he removed his hood and greeted them. At the same time, he said that they had done well indeed. Jerome immediately asked why this man had put on that strange cloak. His sister added that yes, indeed, why had he tried to sneak up to them like a thief? The man noted that he needed to deliver a message unnoticed, and that's why he had done so. After that, he immediately turned to Arya in a whisper and told her something. The interlocutor told her that Jeffrey was waiting for her in a carriage nearby. Because of this, the main heroine went there. When the girl entered the carriage, the Archduke immediately addressed Lottie. He was sitting there with a huge bouquet of flowers and said to the girl that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. The heroine was dazzled by all this and thought what it could be. Then she sat down in front of him and asked if he was returning from a party since she did not understand what those flowers were. The interlocutor noted that he had made them by the road and asked whether they did not smell wonderful. Then he asked if she wanted him to give them to her, but Arya refused. Right after that, Jeffrey said that the girl did not look well. At the same time, he asked if something had happened and whether she had heard any strange rumors. The heroine asked what kind of rumors he was talking about, but the interlocutor noted that it was not important at all. Then he asked whether the girl liked it in the capital of Klaus. The girl noted that everything was wonderful, since it was a very peaceful and lively atmosphere here, and therefore a good city. Then the Archduke asked, what about love? He was very interested whether she had found the love that would help her erase her regret. The heroine immediately hesitated and did not know what to answer. The man saw this and asked if that was not the reason she had come to the capital. She noted to him that it was not exactly so. After that, Jeffrey leaned very close to the girl and removed a small leaf from her hair. At the same time, he asked, what if she looked a little closer? After all, she still did not know. Maybe it was much closer than she thought. He said that maybe even very close and immediately sat down in front of the girl. Suddenly, the heroine exclaimed that yes, she had wanted to ask him exactly about a close person. Then she added that she had wanted to ask about the former captain of the Knights Baron. She asked if it was true that this man was a little over 90 years old. She was curious whether he was still unmarried and if the man could introduce her to him. Suddenly, the interlocutor told Lottie that this man had died last year of old age. The girl was surprised and said that she understood. That's how it was. Then she added, well, rest in peace to that man. After that, she remarked that maybe she should be glad she hadn't died at her age yet, and was still thinking about love. The interlocutor noted that she shouldn't say such things, but should think instead about the people close to her. Then the heroine asked about the Minister of Finance, Alfonso. Jeffrey noted that his great-granddaughter was just about to get married these days. The interlocutor said, really? And that she wanted to congratulate her. Then she wondered why the man was yelling at her. She also added that his trousers would get dirty, so she asked him to sit properly. At that very moment, the Duke sat down and was very sad. The girl looked at this and asked what was wrong and what had happened to him again. The man noted that he just felt a little sad. Suddenly, the heroine turned again to Jeffrey and asked if there was any news from Marvella. She was very interested to know about her students. Then the man turned to Lottie. Taking a deep breath, he said that the sky of Marvella was just the same as the sky of Klaus. Peaceful. As a result, Arya looked carefully at the sky and asked if that was really true. Then she looked up very thoughtfully, remembering her students. In another place at the same time, knights were chasing one of the girl's students. They turned into an alley and saw that he was there, and at the same time called for reinforcements. They also ordered Dan Monty to stand still. The guy still did not listen to them and kept running away. But suddenly he stopped, since he saw that knights were standing in front of him and also behind him. It turned out that there was simply nowhere for him to run now. The knight said that if he continued to run, he would only worsen his situation, and that was why they asked him to go with them. Dan immediately noted that it was all very foolish on their part. At the same time, he asked why they were wasting their strength chasing him. At that very moment, he materialized and disappeared from the knights. They tried to stop him, but it was already too late. The heroine had just returned to her friends. Her friend asked whether she had already talked with Brother Sylvan, But then her friend told Arya that she had forgotten her gloves in the club. She was sad because they were a limited edition. The girl told her that she would bring them, but her friend said that they should go together and take them. Yet the heroine added that they shouldn't do that because she would go alone, since she wanted to be by herself. Her friends at that time did not quite understand her situation. The girl said that she would be back soon, and they should go and eat some cake together for now. After that, she went alone to that very place. The friend, looking at the departing girl, said that Arya looked very exhausted. The brother noted that it was probably because of her. Judith wondered what that scoundrel was saying. Jerome noticed that she only drags people around with her. His sister remarked that he himself suggested going to the Lulu Growing Club, so it was his own fault. Suddenly, they noticed a crowd of knights running nearby in great haste. The sister asked in surprise what was happening there. The brother also asked if that was really the Capitol Guard right in front of them. Then they exchanged glances, not understanding what was going on. The main heroine, after leaving her friends, was walking around the city outskirts. Now she was walking by the river and thinking about everything. The girl thought that if she still went to the Capitol, she could find out news about her own students. She was tormented by thoughts of whether they were all right. At the same time, she realized that probably nothing special was happening in their lives. After that, she thought that she should think positively, not gloomily. After a short while, she finally reached that very place and, opening the door, thought that it was so quiet. She wondered if everyone had already left. Then she looked ahead and saw a guy there. His silhouette seemed quite familiar to her, as if she had seen him before. At that time, the friends, the main characters, were talking with local residents. They were told about some kidnappings and that the townspeople were very alarmed by what was happening. Jerome wondered if they meant that the guards were in such a hurry because the kidnapper was somewhere nearby. He was told that this was indeed the case. Then the guy told his sister that they urgently needed to go after Arya. After all, he was worried because she had gone alone. Suddenly, their interlocutors asked whether they really didn't know anything. In fact, all the commotion was because, according to rumors, the suspect turned out to be Dan Monte from Marvel. The guy asked who this Dan Monte was. The interlocutor wondered how he could ask that. Hadn't they heard of him? It turns out that this guy is the leader of the Black Moon. It also turns out that they should know about Charlotte Eleanor, who is an outstanding archipelago of Marvel. And precisely this person is the third student of Charlotte Eleanor. At that very time, the main heroine met that same guy, who was standing together with Lulu. Dan was standing and looking at a flower when he suddenly noticed that someone was standing nearby. Then he turned his head toward that person and saw that it was some unidentified figure covered with outer clothing. After that, a deathly silence hung between them, and no one even spoke. The heroine was very worried about this and immediately turned to run away. But the guy didn't want to let her go and immediately chased after her. The girl was running very fast, so he used his movement ability and appeared right beside her. At the same time, he told her to stop where she was. At that very moment, the girl stretched out her hand and used her power to push the guy away. He did not expect that and could not defend himself. That is why he was thrown back several dozen meters. A moment later, the guy got up and thought about what had just happened. But while he was thinking about all this, the girl had already disappeared without a trace. Soon the heroine was back with her companions. She was frightened and out of breath. Her friend asked Arya what had happened to her. The girl said that nothing special had happened and asked them to go home quickly. Suddenly, her friend asked if she had seen the kidnapper. The heroine asked in surprise what kidnapper they were talking about. She was told that they themselves did not know all the details. But judging by the conversations, a series of kidnappings had recently taken place in Avente. These were very bad people who took townspeople regardless of their gender or age. But they still could not be caught, because a very powerful person was behind these crimes. The heroine asked what they were talking about and then asked who the main suspect was. Her friend told her that the suspect was Dan Monte. The girl was shocked when she heard those words. Then the guy asked if she also knew who that was. It turns out that this person is the third student of Charlotte Eleanor. It turns out that this woman is the great archmage of the Marvel Empire. Suddenly, Jerome wondered how ordinary guards would be able to capture him. But then he added that he thought perhaps Archduke Luista was capable of handling it. His sister asked why a resident of Marvel would kidnap people in the city of Klaus. Their interlocutor remarked that perhaps there were reasons behind it that they knew nothing about. Suddenly, they all looked at Arya together, and she seemed somewhat nervous. Immediately, her friends asked what had happened to her. The heroine thought to herself, Could it be that this foolish Dan is kidnapping people in Klaus? Then the girl remembered what had happened 30 years ago. One day, a woman approached her and addressed her as Lady Eleanor. She said that another explosion had happened again. Then she added that it seemed she was not strong enough to handle that terrible demonic blood flowing in his veins, and she wondered how much longer she would have to suffer because of him. After all, that child was a real devil. It was very painful and sad for the main heroine to hear all this. Because of that, she went to the room where Dan was sitting. Then she knocked on the door, and the boy shouted for them all to get out. After all, he had already told everyone to go away. The mentor did not listen to him and immediately said that she was coming in anyway. After that, she opened the door and went into his room. When she opened it, she saw the boy sitting frightened under the table. The whole room he was in was completely destroyed, and all the things were scattered around. After that, she told the boy that he was very scared. She also added that she had thought the danger had already passed, but unfortunately she had been mistaken. Then the heroine came closer and knelt beside him. She said that, fortunately, everyone was safe. And it turned out he had tried so hard to control his powers. And he had even managed to do it. Right after that, the woman apologized for being late and addressed Dan. More genres are coming soon. Subscribe to unlock them all.